Hi Sarah, welcome. Just let you know we are broadcasting live. Great, I think we can get started. Hopefully, we don't have a long agenda, so with any luck we should be finished within the hour. I have received apologies from Erwin de Vries, who is traveling, I believe, on the west coast of Australia. So apologies from Erwin, but fortunately David Port is able to stand in for the Partner Engagement Working Group.
Great.
So without further ado, let me open the meeting. The key aims of our meeting today are to review the 2016 operational priorities and the corresponding KPIs as part of our Evergreen Strategic Plan. And then also just to have some discussion about optimal structures to help progress the minimum viable product we agreed at the 2015 partners meeting in Vanderbilt Park. So by way of welcome, the meeting is now open.
Okay.
So let me start with the matters arising. One of the big advantages of holding a management committee meeting after a partners meeting is you actually get a bit of stuff done. So pretty much all the sort of outstanding items we had from the previous meeting have been attended to. The only outstanding item that we raised at the previous meeting was to have some discussion around solutions for maintaining momentum after the partners meeting. And if we have any ideas about doing that. I have to say one of the advantages of having the partners meeting a little bit earlier in the year, the beginning of October, has meant that, as you'll appreciate, there's quite a bit of heavy lifting after the partners meeting in terms of getting all the meeting reports done and the like before the close of our year in the Southern Hemisphere. So having it earlier has been good for us, because we've been able to fit in this last meeting. But at this point, I wonder if we, I can just open the floor. Maybe we can just go around the table to, have a few, or think a little about, is anything we can do to, kind of improve and keep the momentum going, after the partners meeting before, we sort of shut down in the Southern Hemisphere. So let me open the floor there. Any thoughts?
Well, I think we've already been doing a little bit of that. Certainly Sarah has by following up with us, to not just about getting our courses done. I think that's been a great development, and I'd encourage her if she still has energy to continue.
Yeah, no, that has been good. I mean, the other thing is do you think we should, obviously this is going to be dependent on availability of venue and how it fits in with the Northern Hemisphere. But to maybe explore whether we shouldn't try and host the 2016 meetings again early in October, or doesn't it really matter? I mean, we're currently scheduled for the 3rd and 4th and 5th of November, if I'm not mistaken.
I reckon earlier would be better. We definitely are missing out on momentum if the later it is in the year, and I can see a point if we slid backwards to the middle of the year. Eventually, we might get a whole semester's worth of roll. But I know why it is. But it would be interesting if we just did a slow slide back to try and get a bit more of that momentum benefit.
Yeah, I mean the challenge, of course, with the middle of the year is with the Northern Hemisphere is right in their summer vacation. So that's part
maybe
of the
as soon as they come back, then at the beginning of their space, it might, whenever that is.
I think October would be reasonable if the September start date, at least in the UK and so on, is reasonable. You wouldn't want to do it right at the beginning of the academic year there. And the other thing I think is that if today we can, use the action calendar to agree on, the next meeting of our group, and also if we can try and get towards the first meeting of the task force, whatever its composition might be, then I think having dates to aim for you know, as soon as possible in the year, like late January, you know, before the semester starts in the Southern Hemisphere. So I think late January, early February is another opportunity to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah.
I would agree, and just to address Mark's comment about my volunteer chunk of time, I think I ended up probably doing about 2.5 days for 4 weeks, which was the window that I had, and it was, you know, noticeably different, I suppose, what the level of consistency at that amount of time. Unfortunately, that window, as I suspected, was finite, and there's a great deal of end of year business happening in my world at the moment. But that was I think quite a useful experiment to get a sense for what the kind of time that if you did have somebody pushing more regularly, you would get an additional resource and an additional kind of momentum, more down at the finer operational level rather than at the big picture. So, you know, I was contacting you know, numerous of the partners each week. I doubled the number of induction meetings that were held, followed up with the courses that really clarified what was, you know, coming down the pipes and where the gaps were. And, you know, it was, you know, it's nice to get that from Mark's perspective, of course, but there's other people who I think, Brian Mulligan in particular up in Sligo, who is hopefully beavering away on his course as another outcome of that point in time, and connecting Jennifer Lawrence from Canberra around a possible undergraduate prep course connected up to Mark's group, actually. So, yeah, hopefully some of those things might continue to seed.
Okay. So, I mean, and just to wrap up sort of what I'm gauging as a feeling of the group, I think we're saying that it would be advisable to explore whether we can hold the meeting earlier, say earlier in October. I will liaise with Clive and their team to find out if that's possible, and then we can move that forward if we can accommodate earlier in the year. Okay.
Yes.
Right, moving on then to item 3 on the agenda, looking at the 2016 operational priorities and KPIs. Just a quick recap of the process that we adopted to get to this point. At the partners meeting, we did start looking at a number of the KPIs and started thinking about calibrating the KPIs. And at the meeting of the Council of CEOs, we agreed a process to take that forward, assign the strategic planning group to take a good look at what we had developed. I extracted the KPIs and the calibration from the meeting information, developed them in the wiki. Emails went out to all the members of the strategic planning group to go and take a closer look at these KPIs. I also distributed them to our group. There's been some discussion on the discussion pages, so that's where we're at today. Also, from a technology point of view, Jim Titzler has done some interesting work which is going to help us in the new year. Just for folk who might be looking at this at a later stage, I just want to navigate from the planning page. We've got our standard planning portal page. If you want to get to the master list of all our KPIs, it's listed right here in the open planning section, and so it's quite easy to get to this master list. And what this master list is essentially a full list of all the KPIs that we've identified from the meetings and the strategic plan, with a bit of a coding system here for the strategic, the goal and the strategic objective, and a unique number for each of the KPIs, with the dates, the working group that has been assigned. This year, I put a lot more effort into trying to avoid the problem of shared KPIs across multiple groups, because I think that created a bit of confusion last year. and this is a sortable table, so we can sort these by the anticipated due dates. So I think that's been an improvement in terms of how we're presenting the KPIs. The advance that Jim has implemented for us is a widget that is able to extract different views from the master list. And so, for example, we can compile a list which is based on that single source of truth from the big list of KPIs for the different strategic objectives, or we can extract lists for the individual KPIs on the individual home pages of the working groups. So I think this is going to help us a lot with coordinating across the working groups. So I thought I'd just quickly highlight the improvements. Has anyone had a look at the individual pages and thoughts about this new way of sort of publishing the KPIs? Do you think it's going to work better?
Yeah.
Oh, I take it with all the silence people are assenting.
I think it's really useful to have the capability to search and group and combine, because the list as a whole is quite daunting. If when you first come across it and you go through, and it's a very useful reference point. That ability to focus in, drill down to a specific issue is very useful. I think one of the things we can do today, which will be reflected in my comments on the KPI for strategic planning, is looking at the proposed deadlines and how they interact, and whether we need to tweak that a little and come up with a sort of key set of milestones which relate to lots of the activities, so that people are working towards the same date for particular activities where there are dependencies in what we're doing. But as a whole, I think it's a step forward and very useful.
It's David Porter. Thanks, Jim. I like that comment. I was thinking along the lines of, we've got some MVP tasks. I was thinking about some MVP KPIs as well, because the lists are daunting. And it maybe would be a better way to think about MVP as to figure out which KPIs actually are the dependencies and the need for the launch of the MVP, and concentrate our effort on those KPIs. So those become, in quotes, MVP KPIs.
Yeah, I like the thinking, both Jim, your comments in thinking about the deadlines, and then creating a view, if you will, of MVP KPIs. I think that's a very good suggestion. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Mark, were you wanting to say something?
No, I'm worried that if I ask it'll become obvious that I must have sort of gone blank for a moment, but. I'm wondering about what the reference numbers actually refer to, the G1 as opposed to G2 and the O.
Oh, okay. That is obviously due to my exceptionally poor explanation. So basically, from the strategic planning document, we have a number of strategic goals.
Yeah.
So that will be strategic goal 1, strategic goal 2, strategic goal 3, and so on. And within the strategic plan that we approved, there are a number of strategic objectives that relate to those goals. So that's just a referencing number, which says basically that KPI relates to strategic goal 1, it's objective 1, it's the first one relating to objective 1.
Sorry, I know you did say that, I couldn't get my head around it. All right, thank you.
And just from the viewpoint of view, having that unique number gives us the ability to extract these objectives under each of the objectives within the strategic plan. So just a way of presenting a view of KPIs to keep it aligned with the strategic plan. So that was the thinking.
Very good. All right, I had accessed it from a different page, and I was looking at that while you were going over this one. I didn't realize it was elsewhere. Sorry, I'll find that then. My apologies.
Yeah, not to worry. And so, for example, because we've got them assigned to the strategic groups, if you go, say, for example, to the technology working group, what it will do is it will automatically extract just those KPIs which relate to the technology working group from the master list. So the advantage is by having the master list, we've only got one place to maintain and update the KPIs if we need to tweak the due dates, for example. So it just improves our efficiency, but then it propagates through all the pages in the wiki that are actually using the KPIs.
No, that's great. Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
Okay. Right. So I've noted that we should generate a view for MVP KPIs and the corresponding priorities, which I think is a good step forward. Right, so then getting back to the agenda there. So what I propose we do now is recognizing that our strategic plan is an evergreen strategic plan and that we can update and refine and improve as new information comes to hand. But to take at this point, just to take a high-level overview and to have a look, do these KPIs make sense for our individual working groups, and if there are any suggestions for improvement on those KPIs. So let me hand over to the strategic planning group first. Jim, if I'll hand the floor to you.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. I think there's an extensive list of KPIs for the group, but I think it's important that the strategic plan relationship is focused on coordination and facilitation, which is reflected in here, and getting the reporting done. So from a big picture point of view, I think the distribution allocation of KPIs is appropriate. At a more specific level, I think the first deadline that we've got on number 1 is to identify. Can you just go back to that, Wayne?
Jim, are you referring to the master list or the goals for the strategic planning group?
Either will do. Strategic planning group view will do.
Okay.
So, okay, maybe go back to the master list because again, I'm not too I haven't moved between the two. I've tended to use the list. But the first one on the MVP program of study has a target date in one of the views of April 2016 for the first 10 courses. And I think that's optimistic. I put that comment into the discussion page on the wiki. And I think it's a critical issue for us to get the task force working together. And that would be, for me, the major outcome of what we're trying to do. So you've got, the first year of study, the completion of 10 courses available for delivery by April there. I think that's not realistic. And we need a way of managing that. And also, similarly, the additional 5 courses for December next year, I think we need to review that. And as an example, following up from David's comment about an MVP KPIs list, I think if you look at that issue and say we need to have a sort of Gantt chart representation, ideally, not a very detailed one, just an overview of the key milestone dates, so that, for example, if we're going to have 10 courses, ready for delivery by April, what has to happen, between January, February, March, April to get that done, and how do we coordinate it? So I think the general focus of the KPIs is fine for strategic planning and effectively a coordination and reporting role. But the big challenge is, I think, to get an operational integration of activities between the working groups. How do we best facilitate that? And my suggestion is to concentrate on getting the right people in the task force and and I know that's on the agenda later on, but I think getting an MVP view with key milestones, realistic dates, and getting the right people will enable us to, achieve, our major operational focus for next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, I agree. I think those are extremely valuable suggestions in improving the way we're going to operate next year. So I'm taking from that we will generate an MVP view which has key milestones, which will then enable us to, take a closer look at some of the due dates which aren't really that realistic. So, there'll be an action step that we'll need to take forward there. Any other comments from the floor?
Well, if I may, sorry, just quickly, do we, out of the 10, don't we have several that already are complete that we were considering for inclusion in that MVP?
Correct. That is correct, Mark. There are a couple that are already completed. From memory, it's 4 or 5 that we have to, add on to that in order to make the 10. So yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, there's definitely a gap. I just am recalling, I have a feeling one of the ones we thought might have been more progressed isn't, so it probably is around the 5. I'd just like to continue from Jim's line of thinking, which I do think the KPIs are important and all of the reporting is absolutely important, but certainly what we'd normally do locally here is you've got your strategic plan, but there's actually an action plan that operationalizes that. So, how does the rubber hit the road in terms of making, allocating actual resources to getting that done? So I think at the partners meeting there was a feeling that we would it would be good to actually have a person allocated, and we were going to look for scoping what that might be and calling for volunteers or possibly even some funding to get a consistent person who would drive. That's certainly been my experience as what tends to work when you have short time frames. So that to me is a classic operational plan, and that's a different level of making it work than I think we need to spend some time on operationalizing very quickly, as well as like we can finesse the presentation of these kinds of strategic issues all we want, but I think with the goals that we have, we might be better off actually rolling up our sleeves at some point and doing a sprint or something a little more hands-on, even just to get us over the line. But that's just my perspective on meeting deadlines with of the kind that we have.
Yeah. Sarah, I think that again a valuable contribution. I mean, in my mind, I'm seeing this MVP KPI sort of key milestone list as the action plan that should be constructed as an action plan, and we might, for example, include a couple of sprints, during the year, to bring us across the line. So yeah, valuable suggestion. Thanks for that, Sarah.
Just following on from Sarah's comment, I think also the operational plan in some way becomes the focus of the task force, because we need the people to drive not just a leader, but we need the right network of people in the institutions who are clear on the sort of operational parameters that we're running on and where their contribution fits in. So I endorse all that's been suggested about moving towards an operational focus, and I just wonder whether that becomes the responsibility of a task force, which isn't necessarily, as it's been discussed, like combining different groups, but creating a specific set of people, with influence, commitment, time, and so on, to actually come up with the operational plan and help deliver on that. Thanks.
I agree. I think there's got to be a combination of a group, and I guess my comments were coming out of some concern that if we just allocate a group, then there's no clear role to drive, and I think the group and a role that is driving it, the operational day-to-day things, and connecting dots is equally important. I do think it is possible for a group to achieve particular things, but I think in short time frames you just suffer from people not being sure exactly who's doing what when it's too distributed. So I feel as if it's a sort of a person that, and I think I've sort of indicated, I don't think it's a full-time thing, but I think it's more than just the one day voluntary contribution. I think it's going to be more like two to 3 days of effort to have a consistent person would, for me, to be an ideal formula, as working within the scope of whatever the group is.
So if I'm hearing what the management committee are saying, is we're saying that we need a group of people now who are going to progress the action plan, and that may, which is distinct from the sort of the broader task force that is looking at the KPIs. So if I don't hear any objections from the floor, I'll take that to be the assent of our thinking at this point in time, really to have a focus group that puts this action plan together, looks at defining what that role is and or might be, how it could be financed, whether it's through volunteer time or whether we raise additional funding or whatever. But we need that small group to progress the action plan for the MVP KPIs.
And it could be us again, but I think maybe it's just is it realistically going to be this group of people plus a couple of tap on the shoulders people? Can we move it that quickly, or do we feel that it is actually a totally different set of people?
Oh, I think we do this the way that open communities do it. We'll put the call out. We'll shoulder tap those folk who we know are experienced with the OERu, to get this job done quickly. But so basically, what I'm saying is, if there are additional volunteers who want to join, this group to make it happen, they can come along. But I think this is something we do have to complete early in the new year, is my sense. Yeah.
Yep.
I think we definitely need. This is Dave from Christchurch. I think we definitely need to perhaps build events around this, in the sense that a few people agreeing to get together at a certain time, because I think different people working independently and individually are going to be less able to move with confidence than people having that critical mass of kind of agreement and the ability to have individuals help other individuals get over any uncertainties or directional concerns that they might have in that process. Having that group of people together is the kind of the critical mass.
Mm. Yeah. I agree, and if there's a possibility of, if we find out that there's a certain number of Southern Hemisphere developers kind of keen to move but not really having that momentum, we could, for example, propose a Southern Hemisphere sprint, and if Dave, if the technical staff could join in on that and actually, hands-on be linking and building things, we might achieve a kind of group push on the actual developments too. I mean, that I just feel we have those resources actually, identified, and would it be possible to prioritize actually development from the tech staff for just a defined period of time? That would be, I think the partners would feel very supported by that kind of activity.
Could also be very gratifying to see results very quickly.
Yeah.
We can certainly do that, from the foundation's perspective. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. How do we see ourselves using the volunteers who are listed on our people page? I don't know if we've maintained regular contact with them. I've emailed with one or two myself, but I wonder the extent to which we can sort of mobilize them.
It's a very good question, Mark. So in terms of sort of the conceptual thinking around the academic volunteers, we've actually done quite a lot of work in conceiving the concept of academic volunteers. However, we've been rather weak on implementation, and in part that has been really trying to identify the right coordinator. But there's been some development there. I met recently with the new registrar at Curtin University, who has a keen interest in academic volunteering. And he's sort of unofficially offline agreed to actually coordinate such a group. And they've got a number of great ideas. So I think in the new year we're going to make better progress with that than what we've done in the past. It's just he's off on vacation now, and will only be returning in the new year. But I think we're going to see a bit more activity there. I mean, the real challenge is, having somebody to coordinate, the volunteers, because you need a list of things that volunteers can do, right?
Yeah.
And how they fit into that and how they might be rewarded, and those kinds of things. So
training, it's going to be great, but I agree, it's so exciting to see some progress. And at the Albury, there was a sort of Albury meeting, some keen people from the audience sort of energizing that confidence. But I think, Mark, in summary, I would see also that the volunteers might really fit into the delivery support. So when the courses are actually running, having handsome moderators if the learning model suits that. But I'm not sure that it would work to bring them into a development phase because of the amount of induction that needs to happen and the timelines that we have. That's just my feeling. I don't know if others might have a different view.
I think the original concept was around support in the delivery, mentoring students, and help facilitating engagement and that sort of thing. That was the primary focus. I'm sure it can go broader, but I think there's also a need at this stage to focus the committed team of partners to get the MVP running. I think one of the dangers with the project that we're in is there's so many interesting dimensions to it. So I think the main challenge, I think we talked about the year of implementation 2016, is to try and get a concentrated focus on that and get some product out there. And then I think we elaborate and enhance, in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Look, at this stage, Sarah, I think the points that you're raising are valid, and I mean, getting volunteers to work is not trivial, but perhaps we shouldn't focus on the detail now, and actually leave that group to work on that. But yes, our focus needs to be around the MVP and getting those 10 courses done and operational during 2016. So if you're happy, I'm just conscious of the time. I just want to run through the individual groups just to make sure at a high level if the KPIs that are listed are more or less on target, because we will be working on detail when developing the action plan for the MVP KPIs. So moving then on to the partner engagement group. David, I know you guys have had a quick look at the KPIs that were listed there. Any feedback?
No, I think we need to focus on one or two KPIs based on my previous comment. I think that the KPIs that are listed there are great. They're getting started with OERu. But in the discussion we had in late August, one of the things that came out from the 6 people who attended the meeting was that video is the most powerful medium, it would seem, these days, and producing a very short video that actually kind of captures all aspects of OERu might be one of the most helpful things we could do, something that spoke both to learners and to partners at a very, very high level, and would allow people to get a kind of a common baseline of understanding, the kind of conceptual, what is this about, why are we doing it, how does it work, and how do you become involved, like that. One of the things that scared us at our August meeting was how many KPIs we had, and the first thing we did was shave the list down to 3 to focus on things like the partner manual. The other was to really segment who the target audiences had to be for OERu, and there's quite a few of them. even when you leave out learners, people like senior administrators, faculty members and course developers, production people, LMS managers, registrars and prior learning assessment coordinators, people like that. And so I guess our general thinking was that anything we could do to reduce the KPI load and capture in 1 or 2 items the essence of what we were doing and what the first offering would look like would be critical. And I know that the KPIs have changed since the partner meeting in South Africa, and so I see them, but I go back to what our group considered when we met in August, and that was 1 or 2 highly focused, tell the story, build engagement. That was kind of where we were going with it.
Yep. David, yeah, I think that's an important point, and also respecting the autonomy of the working groups in terms of moving their own agendas forward. And I think that's an important message that we're affirming here, is that the actual detail and the action steps related to these KPIs will be determined by the group and the people who are actually doing this stuff, because they're closer to the problem, so to speak. So as I see it, the groups will actually just decide the detail of the action plan, and I think the video is an excellent example of that. And hey, if we can get a powerful video, that would be amazing. Yeah. And
I think 14, 15, and 16, the 2016 KPIs, are essentially what the information package puts together, and part of it ends up being a print resource, part of it ends up showing up on the website, and the front end of it is just a general message of welcome to people who are getting started with OERu. Yeah. So I see 14, 15, and 16 coming out of the same process. Yeah. I really like Sarah's idea of a sprint. Erwin and I actually have a 2-day event coming up, the first day of which we'll be together doing nothing more than just discussing. So one of the things we may do is start to put our heads together at that sprint, on that sprint theme on January 22nd. So it's only a little more than a month away. But I think the sprint idea is a really good one. It's like bear down and produce something.
Mm. Yeah. Yep, I'm very keen on that. And then another interesting focus is the 7th to the 11th of March this year, which is Open Education Week. And so at Wollongong, I'm planning to have a number of public events there. I would really love to be able to have another one of those sprints, but I do have some particular local challenges that I won't discuss here, but conceptually that time, the Open Education Week, might be another good focus. Yeah,
that's a great idea, Sarah. Great idea.
Mm. Yeah, and we could, just a bit more information, we can possibly help there as well, in collaboration with the Open Education Consortium and Creative Commons New Zealand. We will be running a DS4OER sprint to coincide with the Open Education Week. So there will be that kind of activity happening as well, so we can build a bit of international.
Could you be circulate any? If you could circulate any preliminary plans, I think locally that might help us keep our local momentum. That could build into a, we could kind of run with, take our hang our trailer off that train rather than having to drive your own engine. Yep.
Yeah, I expect we'll be able to, within the next week or two, distribute that information. I'm just awaiting a meeting with Mary Lou regarding the final arrangements around that. So, yeah, I think it's an excellent idea, and we can, build momentum together.
Cool.
Okay, thanks for that, David. Moving on then to the Curriculum and Program of Study Working Group. I'm not sure if David might have had difficulties getting into the session, but really these KPIs are about building the program of study document, the program specification for this first year of study, because there are a number of planning related aspects that actually have to slot in with the requirements of the nominated awards. So there are some interdependencies here. So, I mean, these are the key focuses. We are happy with them. We've actually started work on the program specification document for the first year of study. We've also completed quite a bit of research work on the 2 nominated credentials we have on the table so far, in terms of how international articulation might work. So there has been some work happening there. So I'm happy with the KPIs as they stand there.
That's really good to hear, Wayne. And I know that the sort of survey was not fabulously timed, but we did push on with it. Did you get any sniff that there might be any additional quals?
No additional qualifications at this stage, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think focusing on fewer qualifications now and getting those right would actually move us faster than adding the layers of complexity that might come from 10 different awards.
I agree to a point. My only concern, I think, with the existing ones is I think there's a fair amount of maturity and energy in the Australasian partners, and I'm just not sure they quite would know how to deal with those qualifications and contribute to them. So I might be missing something, but then I think if I'm missing it, probably others might be too. And how we, yeah.
As an open collaboration, there's no restriction on anyone putting a credential on the table. The fact that the point is at the moment nobody else has put a credential on the table. So we've got to work with what we have. That's where we're at. Is Wollongong able to put a credential on the table?
I really wish. I've certainly been talking about it. It's just an observation that when there's not something from your jurisdiction that you could offer something locally, I'm just not sure what the model is. I think that we have this. The courses we're offering seem to be when we have something local. It seems to work with our local institution strategies. So I'm just thinking out loud that it might be just a little more difficult to leverage some of the Australasian expertise if we don't. And that, as you say, we work with what we've got, but that's just where my current thinking
yeah. Look, there's certainly with the research we're doing, there are a number of Australian institutions that actually do offer something that is quite equivalent to a certificate of general studies. There are awards at least at 2 of our Australian partners that would fit extremely well with this, but it seems they're not ready to put them on those credentials on the table.
Yes,
yet.
I know. I recall a conversation in the group space, and I think ourselves and David Bull was saying that that's a part of the institution that's not comfortable with the no fee kind of space. It's a somewhat more contested space. So yes, I do think that's
my sense
just a reality.
Is in the real world, the competition of other partner institutions having an award on the table will be a motivating factor for the other partners to move forward at a faster pace. Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting thought. I don't know about that, but that's good to just raise it because I was wondering if I'm missing anything, I suppose. So yeah, I'll give it some thought.
And just one other quick comment on that is that I think that USQ's the complexity of what we would have to run through to put an award on the table at this stage means that we're very comfortable to be contributing to other awards, and students doing any courses that we offer will still get credit towards our own awards. So I think there's a benefit for the institution locally and for students, so they get the opportunity to contribute to an exit award, but they also get credit for a local award depending on which way they want to go forward. Thanks.
Okay. Right, moving on then. Sarah, you can have the microphone again, so to speak.
Sure. Well, we're lucky. We've only got the two, and they're pretty straightforward. So, those certainly are really important, as we've already discussed. In terms of the first KPI, I actually feel in a perfect world that the group practically has had a role in stimulating the development of courses and being a kind of a critical friend to keep, touching base periodically and helping the partners maintain, feel supported to keep going and not lose momentum in their development. So I think the reviewing courses completed is a great concept, but I actually think the help and the sort of support that is coming from this group tends to, it's at the beginning as well. So, but that's just, it's small tweaks really, and in reality it comes down to how much time the members might have as well to do that. But if we do have that strong sense of what the targets are for the MVP, I think we should be able to at least, have a meeting and see if we can call for one member of the existing group to kind of be attached to each of those projects as a sort of a mentor perhaps, so that we have a critical friend allocated to each project. Might work.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's an excellent suggestion, and you recall from the partners meeting, I mean, it was a strong call for improving mentorship within the group. So certainly, I mean, how that is implemented, and I think having mentorship support for the people that are working on courses as kind of part of a sort of formative review process would be extremely valuable.
It's certainly the way the blueprint's designed. The whole quality instruments are supposed to be a work in progress and a communication out. I must say we've not really succeeded in getting that working. We have the system, but people continue to work in pretty much in isolation, and the templates that are supposed to summarize progress and allow partners to review progress periodically for the quality and also for considering the accreditation, we're just not seeing that, and that's despite a number of meetings. So I think that, again, this is one element where having a person who is able to do that more consistently, we might actually be able to model a critical mass of that level of use of the quality instruments as a communications instrument as it is intended, but we just haven't been able to get, despite quite a bit of effort, we haven't quite got, if you like, a critical mass of people just comfortable enough working in the wiki using the templates and in a regular fashion. So hopefully with the level of activity that we want to get, that will be the, if you like, the last prerequisite for getting that activity in the quality instruments in the wiki.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes good sense, Sarah. And it's also been a bit of a catch-22 kind of problem. You need a critical mass of courses in order. Yeah, so
to show what it is and to get people sharing and all of that stuff, and to not feel to feel like you have a cohort of developers. But at the moment, it's been such minority activities in isolated bursts that we tend to find out that things are just about finished. And luckily, so far, the quality of the things that have come out the other end is been, in my opinion, from what I've seen, very high. But there are, some concerns about that we're not yet, as a group of developers, testing the instruments that the network has, partially, if you like, in principle approved.
Yep. That's a good point. Okay, moving on then. The KPIs that we've generated for the Standing Committee for Credit Transfer.
All
Mark,
right.
if I can hand over to you.
Yes, yes. Well, these are more or less straightforward. They're a bit modified from what we originally had been thinking about, simply because it wasn't practical for us to get that documented confirmation from so many partners by, I think originally was even now December. So what we're going to be doing is working on making sure folks have an understanding of the guidelines, and that in principle they are aware of them and they're working toward adoption. And then, so this is a more staggered, I guess, process. They're really not so, they're really more of a piece with one another, if you will. And this is something that was arrived at by the members of the committee in our discussions, as well as the partners meeting in South Africa. So I think those are pretty straightforward. Probably the toughest thing here, I know I seem to be glossing over it, is actually creating the handbook for articulation agreements. I think that's one where we'll need to consult, as we tried to previously, with the registrars that are part of this group. Not just the ones who have been coming to the meetings, but I would once again ask you and the other partners to refer this to their registrars or the registrars' offices, so that we can make sure that what we're writing really speaks to them and is workable.
Yeah, agreed, Mark. And I think the sort of the minimum critical sort of approval or the development of the articulation guidelines must be for the credentials where there's going to be an award, because we've got to make sure those are working.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, that can be our starting point here.
Yes, definitely. But these are pretty simple, I think. They sort of are very much focused for this committee. So, the next step, since the next target due date is February, is apparently to start pulling another meeting together, which raises a question for me, which is when do the institutions in the Southern Hemisphere come back from break?
Depends on your role.
Yeah.
See. But fortunately, we don't have, in terms of the two awards we've got, they're both in the Northern Hemisphere.
Good. That makes it
problem solved.
So we can continue to a lot of folk are back in the latter part of January. Okay. Some poor souls are back sooner, but I think you tend to get a sense of people answering emails kind of late in January.
Okay.
Yeah. But Mark, again, I mean, this reiterates the point. I mean, these are in the wiki. So if the target date needs to be shifted to March because of, that's where we're at, right? We can do that. I mean, that's the point of this sort of dynamic evergreen plan. Yeah.
All right. But I can start working on the Northern Hemisphere at least at first, and then expand out. Yeah.
Okay. Jim, sorry I interrupted you there for a moment.
I was only agreeing with only agreeing with Sarah about the suggested timing. I think most people are back late January and have a window of opportunity before the semester begins, late February or early March, depending on which institution. So I think the timing is just for advice. Thanks.
I think we should definitely pounce on people while they're things are gearing up after coming back from their holiday. Give them a chance to do it before things get really busy when the term starts.
Okay.
Okay, and the final group on the list there, Dave, I will hand the floor over to you.
Sure. Okay, so I actually think in some ways, even though we have a long list of KPIs, I think we have some of the easier tasks to undertake because they're just a matter of working on stuff and not having to get a lot of people agreeing on things necessarily, which I think is the hard bit. In general terms, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, we've discovered that in addition to having a minimum viable product, that kind of implies a minimum viable platform on which to deliver that product. So what we've done is we've taken it upon ourselves to try to describe that minimum viable platform, trying to take a shortest path approach that is using as much as possible the work we've already done, rather than trying to introduce new technologies and so on, which down the track may be better suited to engaging with the collaborators and the learners that we want to bring into this. But in order to get the ball rolling and to achieve that minimum viable product, we're going to focus on consolidating our existing platforms. Having said that, we are also looking at how we will define the responsibilities for what, for example, the OER Foundation will be providing in terms of that minimum viable platform, and what we will expect other institutions, partner institutions, to provide. So it's a question of focusing on describing what we're going to do, clarifying and communicating the responsibilities for that platform that we're describing. There's also, as you can see in number 23 there, there's the pedagogical specifications that underlie the minimum viable platform, and I have to defer to others in that area because that's not anything that I have any expertise or credibility in. And alongside this minimum viable platform, which is designed to minimize the barriers to entry for both learners and collaborators, we will also be continuing to identify and prototype things that will be our focus beyond the minimum viable platform. So the things that we will hopefully be able to showcase as the next steps beyond the minimum viable platform, so that people who decide to invest energy in the minimum viable platform can do so knowing that we'll be rapidly moving on beyond that, and hopefully into areas that are attractive, both from a institutional point of view, where institutions can potentially adopt and have assistance from us in adopting some of these technology improvements, but also things like looking at how we can consolidate the technology platforms that we're providing in such a way that they integrate better with what collaborators and OER will want to be using. So we take on board, for example, the fact that the wiki has not necessarily resulted in the level of engagement we would have hoped. So we're looking at how we can remedy those beyond the minimum viable platform.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. I mean, one of the you would have noticed that the technology group KPIs are a much longer list than the others, and in part that is due to the fact that we've got a couple of platinum tier partners who've been able to contribute to the shared open source technologist position, which has really given our capacity a major boost to move critical issues forward in a more robust way. So. Yeah,
and thanks very much for that, by the way.
Right. Okay, so running through the list, I mean, I think we've got a good list of KPIs. We accept that there needs to be some tweaking and refinement around the edges. We'll need to actually figure out what the detail of the implementation of those are in the light of our upcoming action plan MVP KPIs. But I think we're in a far better starting point this year than what we were last year, in hopefully having better calibrated KPIs than the first time round. So we're getting better at what we're doing. Any closing comments from the group around the review of the KPIs before we move on the agenda?
Just very quickly, I tweaked the wording of mine on the fly on the master list, and was very happy to see it update on the working group page. So go tech team, it all works. It was lovely.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and if it doesn't work, let us know. It's open source, we can fix it.
Great.
Right. So I'll take silence to mean assent so that we can move on to the next agenda item. During this process of consultation on the KPIs, we've been having some discussions around, optimal organization for the next phase. And Sarah put forward what I think is an excellent proposal, and that is to actually combine the curriculum and program of study group with the course approval and quality group, because there is quite a bit of overlap, between the foci of these two groups. So I'm tabling Sarah's proposal, which I'm a strong supporter of. I think it's going to help us move forward in ways we weren't able to do in the past. So let me open the floor there for any comments around this proposal. Sarah, do you want to add anything?
Oh, yes. So basically, it just has become clear, chairing one of these groups for the last period, that the administration, in finding common times for meetings, getting a sort of a number of people joining and hosting and the technology and all of that sort of stuff, it does actually, it is a significant thing, and because we really are trying to get the support for the planning and the support for the minimum viable product, and we have I think really some core active members sitting in both groups, it just seems a real waste of energy to have to run even two sets of agendas, two sets of wiki pages, two sets of calling those meetings, when we have actually a pretty common core of overlapping members. And it must be said, there's a number of members who are not enormously active, so bringing, I guess in this period, bringing that mob forward when we're not perhaps getting the same level contribution, I think we should just work with the core and make it more efficient, really.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head. I agree. I think that's a step in the right direction. If I don't hear any objections from the rest of the floor, I'll take silence to mean assent that we move forward with that proposal. It sounds like there's a general agreement from the silence. So moving on then, part of this discussion relates to thinking about an MVP task force, for want of a sort of a better label, and that is to think about in moving our minimum viable product forward, how do we organize ourselves for this part of the process. I've been doing quite a bit of research on the two credentials or the two awards we have on the table, and how they might work and interoperate with each other. And I've come to the realization that there are a number of interdependencies. So for example, you can't decide what courses you're going to list from multiple partners until you've figured out how the articulation agreements are going to work between these people that are giving the awards. So my thinking is, at least for this period of time, for those objectives which overlap, some of the working groups may need to work together on a task force. I also think that it would be beneficial, for example, to have sort of the lead convener of each course development that is working on MVP to possibly be part of the task force, because there are a bunch of things and many moving parts that having the opportunity to sort of meet on a regular basis might help us move forward with products. So this is a thinking that's on the table at the moment, is to put this task force together in helping move minimum viable product forward. And just to avoid confusion with the earlier decision we've taken, this is something that is different from the group that's going to be putting the action plan together, although there might be overlap between the people working on both of these groups. So let me open the floor there. Thoughts about having an MVP task force to take us forward with our action plans.
So can I just check in my understanding? It seems that there's a lot of conceptual and policy kind of work around the awards and the credit transfer component, and this is what this is primarily going to be about, which is separate from the operational angle of trying to produce product. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, at one level there is a bunch of policy stuff, but at the same time, I mean, for example, if you've got a bunch of people working on a course, and it has to meet certain policy requirements. We've got this chicken and egg kind of problem, and the best way to deal with that problem is to have the two people speaking to each other to say, well, okay, if you develop the course in this way, the likelihood of it working is very strong while we keep working on getting the policies approved. You see what I'm saying? So it's really having that space where people can be working together as we move this forward. To ensure that we've got, the 10 courses we want operational by the end of the next year.
I know exactly what you meant. Having I had a kind of a conversation with a partner along these lines. They partners proposing course X, and when I looked at the minutiae of what was required, I couldn't see a great deal of overlap with what the existing sort of interests of the other partners in terms of finding common ground for cross-accreditation, and suggesting, oh well, perhaps you could take this angle because there appears to be more interest and ability to accredit course that includes blah, and then the end point is, but our local institution doesn't do that, so we have to just stick with what we're doing. So that's that's that principle in action, about the big picture and the local, and trying to get it, the product to meet as the bigger picture. And I think in practical terms, what occurred to me at the time is that it was often just a minority of additional content and possibly some assessment rewriting which might make it or break it. And so nevertheless, the core of the content and getting the development of that content pushed forward would still be probably in the end a useful set of activity, but understanding that there's a kind of a bit of a possible final hurdle to meet the credit transfer requirements. But that doesn't to me necessarily mean we need to wait to the very, there could still be a lot of practical activity happening parallel to the conversation.
I'd just like to comment on that. I feel again that the work that Wayne's done on looking at the complexities of interinstitutional accreditation and the like is very useful, but it highlights also the potential complexity of that dimension of the task. And then there's the other dimension of making sure that we get the courses actually developed that will contribute. So there are two major issues. One is sheer product development, and the accreditation dimension adds another layer of complexity. And just from my perspective, I think we need to take the path of least complexity at this stage, otherwise the timeline will tend to drift out. And I really do think we need to, get something delivered this year. And so, in general, I suggest that we take the path of least complexity. We use the KISS principle in general, which I think everyone agrees with, but it's particularly important, I think, in the current context, the diversity of institutions involved. So that's one suggestion I have, and the other comment is that at each of the institutions that are contributing to the initial list of courses, the initial delivery group, I think we need a key player from each of those institutions contributing to the task force so that they can coordinate and allocate resources, or advocate, or make things happen generally. And I realize that's not an easy task, depending on what stage some institutions are at. So my suggestion is that we think carefully about the composition of the group, and that we take the path of least complexity, and in a sense, the most influential people that we can get onto the group at their local institutional level, so they can delegate tasks if possible. It's my other suggestion. Thanks.
I would agree, Jim, and I guess I'm trying to probe that same level of the balance of effort between getting product out and having it perfect for assessment and accreditation. And I guess I would reflect in the other MOOC and open ed providers that we have. They tend to get the product out first, and then very quickly, in the light of this very transparent product that people are experiencing, able to perhaps in the second iteration add on the kinds of things that would make for the credit offering to be transparent. So I'm wondering if it isn't strategic for us to do a similar thing while we acknowledge the absolutely essential work that Wayne and this group is doing to make sure that we very rapidly close the gap on the assessment and the accredit components, that it actually makes it easier, I think, to negotiate those elements when you have something close to being finished, that you can tweak that assessment, or you can consider adding in an extra module. It's really hard to get engagement when you've just got nothing to look at product-wise, and it might be better for us to have a number of courses out there that are close to meeting the various assessment requirements for the first year exit, certainly meeting the general studies requirement, but maybe not yet perfectly making the first year exit credential the first offering, but very quickly the second iteration. Is that possible for us to make that kind of practical call?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking practically from the experience of working with the OERu over the last couple of years. I do agree with Jim's advice that we need to take the path of least resistance, because that's the best way in terms of getting product out there. But the point is, if we don't know what the barriers are, it's hard to define what the path of least resistance is. So just at a very practical level, we might be developing this great course here, and then the University of Highlands and Islands says, well, no, that's not going to work in our system. We need to know, what will work and what won't work, and make sure that we design our courses for the end product, which is assessment for formal academic credit. I mean, that is our point of difference. So the idea of the task force is actually to work backwards, to say, well, here are the awards, this is what's required to meet these awards, and then we see how we design the courses that they fit for 2016, because this is minimum viable product. It's not the total product for OERu, but we really need to get courses out there where students earn real credit from real institutions towards real awards. And then I think that experience will help us in moving the OERu forward in ways we haven't been able to do before. So it's really about getting the right people in the room to have this ongoing conversation, so we achieve our objectives for the year.
Can I make just a quick follow-up comment? I think it's possible maybe to think that the courses that we put up will have credit. I mean, that's a fundamental basis of what we're doing. So they have fundamental access to gaining credit at one institution, which is the one that's offering or assessing. I realize there's variations on that theme. Whether that particular course can have an articulation agreement, which means it will also get credit at UHI, is the dimension of complexity that comes in. And I'd like ideally to move as quickly as we can, but my suggestion might be that we still offer courses for credit, whether they contribute to the exit awards or not, because we're servicing people who may not also want an exit award but still want to gain credit.
That's pretty much what I said. That's exactly what I was trying to say, Jim, that because people have been working towards the Bachelor of General Study and things are getting close, I think to put those up and get them out, and then that will surface that content in a way that will enable somebody to assess the subject that might be, for Thompson Rivers, they could say, right, well, this is close, but if we add this module and you offer it again, we'll be able to credit it. It's going to be faster, I think, to connect those two dots. And also give us that visibility and just be starting to educate learners who need to be educated. So that's exactly what I'm was trying to say. I think I said it in a very long fashion. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that's the OERu model. Every institution is able to provide credit for their own courses they're putting into the mix. And so that goes on without saying. But our minimum viable product says there will be an exit award. So we've got to make sure that we can achieve it. And that will require articulation agreements. And if those aren't in place, at some institutions, other institutions, they might not require that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But we've got to make sure that when we're going to market and saying that you can get an award, that you actually can get an award. We don't want students arriving at Thompson Rivers University and TRU saying, "Oh, sorry, you can't use that credit here."
Yeah, sure. They need to be able to make a start. I know. I'm just trying to be realistic about if there's courses that are getting close to being put out there, they look like they fit the general studies model. They look like with some tweaking they might get to the TRU or the UHI degree. Like if it might be possible to get them out there and then run them a second time, having absolutely dotted every I and T for the first year exit awards, that would be better than not getting them out there because we're not yet sure. That's the question mark. I don't know, but I'm just question marking it. Same thing that Jim is saying. Yeah.
We have an obligation in terms of what we communicate to the learners, and we've got to be absolutely clear that if you're taking this course that hasn't been agreed for articulation, it will not articulate. We have to be very upfront about that.
Yes. No, I agree.
One area we're going to burn our fingers proverbially is if we don't get this piece right.
I totally agree.
The thinking of this task force is, to have the right group of people sitting around the table to make sure we get this right.
I agree. And just making the point that if the message, we still have time to shape the message to be realistic as well. So if it means that we've got, 6 or 7 that fit the first year credential and a couple of others that fit just the Bachelor of General Studies, and then we work towards getting them into the exit credentials, that would be a reasonable a good thing, better than not having much out there, I suppose. Anyway, I'll just finish.
If I could, just pipe up here. This reminds me of a couple of things that came up during our meeting in South Africa. One, the thing that Rory kept talking about, which was using courses that are already out there, like Sailor Academy courses or something else along those lines, and then that would give us some sort of a not ready-made but almost ready-made thing. And then that leads me to the second thing, which is the extent to which each institution is going to have to customize either the content of the courses or the assessments by which they will be awarding credit. It sounds as though we're sort of converging on that idea. What Sarah was talking about having something that's I don't think these are the words she used, but good enough sort of approach that can then be refined later. It might be exactly what we need to do with some of these materials that are already out there. I know for a fact that the U.S. institutions won't be able to accept courses as is from any institution outside the United States, but we could certainly tweak the content of anything that we've developed, and certainly could develop an assessment as an add-on. Would that be an easier thing to do, or is there some reason why that may not be worth doing at this point?
I think that's definitely doable, and from my perspective, I would hope that the network actually does those things.
Yeah.
But we've got to have those conversations, and so that when we go live with MVP, we can actually communicate to the learners accurately. What is going to happen for this instance. Then you need to know, okay, I'm doing this course, I can get credit there in these ways with these institutions. And if we have the right institutions on the table, we will achieve that objective. And you're absolutely right, Mark. Assembling the courses from existing OERs and providing the assessment services is a much quicker way to go. The dilemma, of course, is just give a practical example. I don't know if UHI will accept CLEP credit.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm sure.
I just don't know that.
Yeah.
And so unless we have that conversation, we're not going to move forward.
No. Well, the CLEP thing is unique to the U.S. or certainly North American market, but developing that assessment locally seems like it would
Absolutely.
be easier thing to do than come up with this course that seems to be giving us so much trouble at this point.
Can I just add another dimension to the thinking? When we were looking at this originally, we put the international student market into the perspective, and of course there's lots of international students coming to Australia, for example, and at USQ we had 20% of our students who were seeking credit for prior learning based on work that they had done, say in Malaysia, Hong Kong, where it happened to be. And we created a precedence database so when the student is driving the process, so he puts the transcripts, he provides the course curricula, whatever it happens to be, and then that's assessed against a particular program. And if that was an acceptable, it fitted into the course structure, then they got credit. And I think it's one thing to approach it from an institutional perspective that demands tweaking. If we look at it from the student perspective and the recognizing prior learning perspective, would we come up with a different approach? Could there be a precedence database created by OERu partners? And we did some initial work on that a while ago when we were looking at nominated courses. Would you give credit for this and so on? So a similar process might need to be revisited. Thanks.
And Jim, that's exactly what the articulation handbook needs to do. And that's the work of the standing committee to say, well, okay, this is how this process is going to work. Here are a bunch of methods. And so that we've got clarity in terms of how this is going to work, and so the partners have also got clarity in terms of how they can move forward. But we need to document that and get those agreements in place. So what we're saying is, yes, that we're going to move that forward, but we need the practical processes for making it work, so that we know what we communicate to our learners. Okay, I think we're kind of getting into the complexity and the detail of this work. I think the key decision we need to take now is, well, are we comfortable with moving forward with this MVP task force? And we can then figure out the detail in terms of the best composition and to achieve what we're trying to achieve. But at this point, a principal decision to establish the MVP task force to deal with these issues. Do we have any objections?
I agree it has to happen. I'm just, I guess, a little clear as to the overlap between the merged working groups. Where does that sit in relation to the MVP task force?
My thinking around that is, if there is a high area of overlap, that the respective working groups actually sit on the MVP task force.
Right, so the working groups are reporting under the task force, so it's kind of like an MVP steering, and then the merged working groups are can maybe get allocated some operational stuff that makes it happen. Is that the structure you're thinking?
Without getting into the detail, how I would imagine something like this working is the MVP task force is the meeting room where people can talk. And then it feeds into our, organizational working group structures, and then the OERu management committee. So this is really the space of getting the right people around the table at the right time, to move things forward. And I suspect that the first two meetings of the task force could actually substitute some of the program and curriculum working group meetings, if we're all there.
Yeah.
And
That's pretty much what I'm thinking. I think it might work practically to merge the two working groups and just have the MVP task force as the singular first big item on that agenda. So flip it the other way around.
Sure.
Because we already have pages. Just practically, we already have a structure that exists. So.
And what I'm suggesting is we use those structures that we have. We don't change the structures. This is the conversation space, if you will. So in other words, thinking of two groups that need to be talking together at a given time, depending on the needs, that we've got the space to do that.
Yep.
Okay. Is anybody else that objects to having a MVP task force? Right, so I'll take silence to mean assent, and we figure out how it works. And as with all open models, if it doesn't work well, we'll reconfigure and reconstitute in an open way. Right, and so that, if we move with that forward, the likelihood of having 10 people in a meeting, or more than 10 people in a meeting, is a possibility, which means we wouldn't be able to use Google Hangouts for that purpose, because there's a restriction on the number of participants that can actually engage in the meeting. So we're in the processes of exploring a substitute technology. It's not as simple as it seems. I first thought that maybe partners could contribute their web conferencing rooms, as part of a contribution to this process. But as it turns out, it's not that easy, because it has to do with password access to these systems and the like. The other challenge, of course, is finding environments that can operate on all operating systems. As you'll appreciate, the OER Foundation doesn't have any enterprise proprietary technology. The shortlist at the moment, we're looking at a technology called Zoom. It's you can buy a hosted service. And the reason Zoom is on the short list is because they do have a client for Linux, which is pretty important for an open foundation. So that's where we're at the moment. Being a hosted service means that if we need to replace it with something else, it would be easy to do. So that's just by way of information, unless there are any comments or suggestions as to how to move this challenge forward.
What's the upper limit of numbers in the current tech, Wayne?
Well, we can't have more than 10 people simultaneously engaged in the meeting, although we can broadcast to an indefinite number of people.
I don't know if we would. I appreciate that planning for that is important, but considering the time, how we often having to run a couple of meetings because of the time difference, I'm not sure if we would get.
Oh, I've had.
Think you will? Well, it depends on
yes,
who do you.
I've already had a number of meetings that we've convened. We've had more than 10 people, so I've had to ask some people.
Okay.
So, yeah,
ouch. Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you.
Wayne, wasn't there something called Big Blue Button that we were looking at for something? I know that I understood that's to be an open format.
Yeah, we looked at it rather. I mean, Dave, perhaps you can comment on it. Obviously, our preference would have been to use open source technology. We've done some testing. Dave, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, sure, can do. Ultimately, that would be an interesting option. However, we did try to do some testing with it just recently, and we found that due to the historical use of technologies like Flash with Big Blue Button, it actually results in a relatively complex process for getting people access to Big Blue Button, and it also it has a couple of other foibles that make it difficult to use with mobile technologies, for example. We're very, from an openness point of view, we're very keen to be using the new emerging video conferencing technology called WebRTC, which is what this Google Hangouts is based around. It's actually an open source technology stack that's built into Chrome and Chromium and Firefox browsers, but unfortunately none of the kind of larger scale webinar type packages support it yet properly. So we're looking for effectively a stopgap. So I think we see Zoom as a stopgap technology until such time as a viable WebRTC based technology is available.
Thanks.
Right. So I'll take it that we can then move forward with that. I'll look at that closely in the new year. This, of course, is subject to them. One of the challenges they've got at the moment with the Linux client is they don't support recording for Linux users. But we've had word from the company that that functionality will be implemented in the next release, which is targeted for December. So there's going to be a bit of wait and see to see how we might move forward there. But that's where our thinking is at the moment. Right, then moving on. This is also just a bit of information and feedback. I've had confirmation from Phil Kerr, the Chief Executive Officer at Otago Polytechnic, that they will be contributing 4 courses in the business area. Principles of leadership, strategic management, project management, and human resource management. So this is a big step forward. It means that we'll be available for credit here. But in the spirit of our MVP task force sort of thinking, there might well be opportunities for collaboration on the summative assessment options here. So kind of Mark, I've also been thinking of how Thomas Edison State College might want to provide assessment services for these courses, and because we're working on the development, we can tweak these things in a way that they fit a larger number of institutions. I do have some funding with that I can invest in getting this outsourcing some of this development work around these courses, and I'm keen to invest in this area, largely because well, I'm not so sure that it's that surprising, but the greatest reticence coming from giving courses or giving away courses for free in the open tends to come from the business faculties. And we've got an institution here that doesn't worry about those things. So I think this is a good way of moving at least a core set of courses forward in the business area. So that's going to bring us closer to MVP.
Great.
Right, so Mark, I might...
I'm just going to actually give my apologies. I have to leave for another meeting, so I will check in with the minutes about the next meeting date. Thank you, everyone. It's been a really fantastic meeting.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Right. So, and that actually brings us to the last item of the agenda, unless there are any comments on in relation to the business courses. Right, moving on. Date for our next meeting. Let me put a suggested date out there, early February.
Sure.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. The other thing I would like to suggest, if it's possible, is that we have the focus group for the MVP planning somehow get something on the table for that meeting. So we haven't really, closed on the composition and dates and deadlines and milestones. So do you think that's possible for that early February meeting?
It's possible if anyone in the group actually takes that forward and gets the work done. I'm officially taking my vacation over January. So yes, it's possible if there are folk that can get the work done
can we make any progress on? Sorry, but can we make any progress on that prior to the holidays?
As I've said, anybody that wants to take that on can do it. Yeah.
Okay.
So, have you got any volunteers to move that forward? Not yet.
I'd be happy to do something if that's.
Yes.
If it's something that I can do usefully, given my sort of, I suppose, unusual circumstances being involved in this, I'm more than happy to do so if that'll help.
Yeah, I mean, even just sort of getting the document set up in the wiki and sort of the headings and that that people can contribute to, and that's really going to help.
Right.
And normally I'm very attentive. It's just once a year I do an off-the-grid thing. Literally, I do not connect to the internet, for 3 weeks. But it's only once a year I do that.
Well, I'll probably be off the grid to a certain extent as well, but I'd suspect that I'll be diving or dipping into communications a bit more regularly than that. So I should be available during that time, even though I'll be not necessarily in my home office.
Well, Dave, I'm happy to provide a point of consultation on that, just as we develop the wiki structure and so on. I'm not offering to take on the role of actually delivering a sort of an action plan, but to contribute to the structure as we move forward.
That'd be very helpful. Thanks, Jim.
So I guess what we're saying is we'll do what we can, sort of over the holiday break here in the south, and see where we're at by the time of the first meeting. But I think it's important to pin that first meeting of the OERuMC in February, and then we'll deal. The agenda will deal with what we can at that point of time. Yeah. Okay. Well, I attempted to get this meeting done within an hour, but we delved into some important detail. But I think that it's been productive, and so I do want to thank you for your time, and apologies for running a little over time. But I think we've made important progress. So unless there are any other general issues or matters that anybody wants to raise, I think we can adjourn the meeting.
That's fine.
Very useful exercise. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all. I'll stop the broadcast now. See you later.
All right. Thanks very much, all.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.